The greatest triumphs are often born not of brute strength, but of an invisible, unyielding force. It is the capacity to be knocked down, to absorb the seismic shock of failure, and to still find the will to rise. This is the story of resilience, the quiet superpower that defines human success. It is not an inherited trait, a gift bestowed upon the lucky few, but a muscle, developed, strengthened, and tested in the crucible of adversity. We begin on the edge of a precipice, with individuals facing moments that should, by all accounts, break them. Imagine the entrepreneur whose decade of work vanishes in a single economic downturn. Consider the athlete whose career is threatened by a sudden, devastating injury. Picture the scientist whose critical experiment yields failure after failure, demanding a restart from ground zero. These moments are universal, they are the friction points where ordinary effort gives way to extraordinary fortitude. Our journey will uncover the biological, psychological, and sociological mechanisms that underpin this quality. We will delve into the neuroplasticity of the brain, exploring how trauma can, paradoxically, reorganize our neural pathways for greater strength. We will examine historical figures and modern titans, from the arts to the corporate world, who all share a common biography, a profound encounter with defeat. Their success was not the avoidance of hardship, but the mastery of their response to it. The opening hook is simple, to reveal that the secret to enduring achievement is hidden not in what you achieve, but in what you overcome. Resilience is the pivot point, the moment of transformation from victim to victor. It is the internal compass that recalibrates after the storm, pointing back toward the goal. This documentary is a blueprint for building that muscle. We will dissect the stories, the science, and the strategies that turn setbacks into slingshots. We challenge the notion of bouncing back and instead propose the concept of bouncing forward. True resilience doesn't return you to your previous state, it evolves you into a stronger, more adaptable version of yourself. Prepare to see failure not as an ending, but as the essential middle chapter of every success story. We are about to pull back the curtain on the invisible muscle. Its power is real, and it is accessible to all who choose to train it. To understand the core of resilience, we must first establish the environment in which it thrives: high-stakes pressure. Our documentary will follow three distinct subjects, each representing a different facet of extreme adversity. First, there is Dr. Ilara Vance, a lead cognitive neuroscientist. Her challenge is intellectual, a decade-long quest to isolate the resilience circuit in the human brain. She faces the daily grind of inconclusive data, funding crises, and the skepticism of her peers. Her story is one of maintaining belief in an unseen solution, a metaphor for the scientific resilience required to push the boundaries of knowledge. Her research offers the intellectual framework for our discussion. Second, we meet Javante J. Reed, a former Olympic-level gymnast. Jay's adversity is physical and emotional. A career-ending injury forced him into premature retirement and a severe identity crisis. His challenge is to redefine himself, to translate the discipline of his athletic life into a new, meaningful purpose. We follow his emotional journey through rehabilitation and the difficult process of mental reframing. He represents the resilience of self-identity and the ability to pivot under duress. Third, we track the progress of the startup founder, Chloe Tan. Chloe's company was on the verge of its Series B funding when a catastrophic data breach wiped out their client trust and necessitated an entire organizational restart. Her narrative explores financial and organizational resilience. She must rally a demoralized team, rebuild a shattered product, and convince investors to believe in a phoenix rising from the digital ashes. Her story provides the corporate and economic perspective on bouncing back from systemic failure. Through these three narratives, the scientific pursuit, the personal crisis, and the business breakdown, we establish a comprehensive view of resilience in action. Their journeys are interwoven with expert commentary from psychologists, military strategists, and performance coaches. The stage is set for a deep exploration. We see the controlled environment of the lab, the isolated intensity of the rehabilitation center, and the chaotic, high-pressure atmosphere of the crisis war room. Each subject is on a unique path, but all are united by the necessity of cultivating their invisible muscle to succeed. Their success is not guaranteed, making their struggle all the more compelling and their eventual outcomes critical to our understanding. The core mystery of resilience is not why some people succeed after failure, but how they manage to keep moving when their internal mechanism for hope should be exhausted. Why does one person crumple under pressure, while another, facing an identical catastrophe, finds a surge of unexpected energy? Our initial problem is the widespread, cultural misunderstanding of what failure actually is. We treat it as a terminal state, a final grade, rather than a necessary, iterative data point. For Dr. Vance, the problem is the brain's default setting, the tendency toward a negative bias in times of stress. Her initial mystery is how the resilient mind overrides the amygdala's fear response to engage the prefrontal cortex for problem solving. She presents her early models, which repeatedly failed to predict post-traumatic growth, suggesting a hidden variable. Jay Reid's initial problem is the loss of his physical identity. The core of a gymnast's success is bodily control and a relentless, perfect routine. His career-ending injury is a betrayal of his own flesh, leading to a deep emotional spiral. The mystery for him is how to regain a sense of mastery when his primary tool, his body, is broken. He struggles with the phantom pain of lost purpose, the psychological dead weight of an unwritten future. He questions whether his decades of rigorous training were ultimately meaningless. Chloe Tan's core problem is the paradox of external trust. Her company, a security firm, failed its own fundamental test, protecting data. The mystery is how to manufacture trust when the very product is a demonstration of unreliability. She faces lawsuits, media scrutiny, and a mass exodus of key talent. Her initial response is panic and blame, the antithesis of resilient leadership. The problem is existential: how to resurrect a business whose reputation is its lifeblood, now poisoned by internal failure. Across all three subjects, the initial problem is characterized by an overwhelming sense of powerlessness. This is the starting line for our exploration. The mystery is the source of the hidden power that will turn their powerlessness into focused action. We must look beyond simple grit and explore the sophisticated neurological and psychological systems that allow them to endure the initial shock and begin the hard work of rebuilding. The crucial discovery that begins to unravel the mystery is a concept known as cognitive reappraisal, a cornerstone of resilient thought. This is the mind's ability to consciously reinterpret a highly emotional situation in less emotionally charged terms. For Dr. Vance, this discovery comes from an anomalous finding in her EEG studies. She observes that in her most resilient subjects, the emotional processing center, the limbic system, doesn't shut down under stress. Rather, it rapidly hands over control to the rational, planning center, the prefrontal cortex. The first major clue is the speed of this handover. It's not the absence of pain, but the efficiency of the response to pain. She hypothesizes that resilience isn't about feeling less, but about thinking differently while feeling. Her team isolates a specific neural signature, a momentary, low-frequency oscillation that acts like a mental circuit breaker. This is the first tangible, observable evidence of the invisible muscle flexing. For Jay Reed, his first major clue is a conversation with his physical therapist, who is also a former soldier. The therapist introduces the concept of response flexibility. The gymnast's previous mental framework was rigid, perfection or failure. The new clue is accepting that there are infinite shades of success outside the one he defined for himself. Jay begins training with a deliberate focus on failure, performing drills designed to go wrong, forcing him to adapt mid-movement. His crucial discovery is that his body, though changed, is not useless, it is simply different. He shifts his internal narrative from, "I am a broken gymnast," to, "I am an adaptive athlete." Chloe Tan's major clue arrives via an unexpected meeting with her chief engineer, who stayed. The engineer presents a plan to open source their failed security protocol, inviting the global security community to scrutinize it for flaws. It is a radical act of transparency, turning their biggest failure into a collective learning experience. Chloe's crucial discovery is that vulnerability can be a strength. By admitting the depth of the failure publicly, they disarm their critics and begin to rebuild trust through radical honesty. This pivots her from a defensive posture to an offensive, problem-solving one. Across our subjects, the crucial discovery is the same: the first step of resilience is a deliberate, conscious act of reinterpretation that transforms a catastrophe into a challenge. The mind begins to see the setback as a puzzle to be solved, not a punishment to be endured. To provide context for these breakthroughs, we must delve into the origins of resilience research, tracing its roots from developmental psychology to modern neuroscience. The concept of resilience initially emerged from studies of children of adversity. Researchers in the 1970s tracked children growing up in high-risk environments, poverty, parental mental illness, chronic trauma. The profound observation was that a significant portion of these children did not develop expected pathologies, they thrived. These were the resilient ones, and their existence became the original mystery. The context of this early research shifted the focus from pathology, what goes wrong, to salutogenesis, what leads to health and success. We highlight the work of early pioneers who identified key protective factors. These were not internal biological gifts, but often external and environmental factors. The presence of a single, stable, and supportive adult, a teacher, an uncle, a community member, was repeatedly shown to be the most critical element. This contextualizes resilience not as a solitary journey, but a socially supported one. Dr. Vance's research is now informed by this context. She connects the idea of a supportive social net to neurobiology. She explains that secure attachment figures, in early life, essentially train the brain to release oxytocin, the bonding hormone, in times of stress, counteracting the effects of cortisol, the stress hormone. The human brain's capacity to cope is, in part, a reflection of its training in early relationships. We look at the military context, where resilience training has become formalized. The U.S. Army's comprehensive soldier fitness program is examined, which uses cognitive behavioral techniques to train soldiers to identify and challenge catastrophic thinking. This demonstrates that resilience is a trainable skill, not a fixed personality trait. For Jay Reid, the origin of his struggle is the perfectionist culture of elite sports. We provide context on the psychological toll of a zero-sum, all-or-nothing approach to performance. His therapist uses this context to reframe his years of intense discipline. The discipline, she argues, is not wasted, it is the engine that can now be steered toward a new path. The context reveals that resilience is a cumulative resource. Past successes and failures build the capacity to handle future crises. It is an invisible reserve built over a lifetime of small battles, now being called upon in the ultimate war. The journey escalates as our subjects encounter conflicting theories about resilience, forcing them to refine their approach. The first conflict is between the hardiness theory and the flexibility theory. Hardiness, the older school of thought, emphasizes stoicism, control, and commitment, a rigid, unbending will. Flexibility theory argues that the most resilient systems are those that can bend, adapt, and even break strategically to absorb shock. Dr. Vance finds herself in a professional conflict with a rival neuroscientist who adheres to the hardiness model, dismissing her cognitive reappraisal focus as soft science. The stakes in the lab escalate as Dr. Vance's funding is tied to proving her model can lead to measurable, clinical improvements in stress recovery faster than the rival's fixed mindset intervention. She needs a breakthrough that proves flexibility's superior evolutionary advantage. For Jay Reid, the conflicting theories play out internally. He attempts a hardiness approach, forcing himself into intense, painful, traditional workouts, trying to will his old body back. This results in re-injury and a dangerous emotional relapse. The escalating stakes are personal. He faces the choice between accepting a fundamental change in his physical capabilities or descending into chronic depression. The conflict is between his memory of who he was and the reality of who he is now. His coach forces him to embrace flexibility by introducing entirely new forms of movement, dance, yoga, and adaptive sports, which challenge his core definition of athleticism. Chloe Tan faces the conflict between short-term financial recovery and long-term organizational change. Her board, adhering to the hardiness theory of business, wants to suppress the open-source initiative and focus on a rapid, cosmetic rebrand. They see transparency as weakness, she sees it as a competitive necessity. The escalating stakes are the company's survival and her own position as CEO. She risks an internal power struggle by pushing her vision for a truly resilient, transparent, and adaptive corporate culture. She argues that true business resilience means embedding the lesson of the failure, not burying it. The conflict across all narratives highlights a critical truth. Old models of success, based on rigid control, are often the very thing that prevents true resilience. The path to enduring success is through dynamic adaptation, a principle that applies to the brain, the body, and the balance sheet. The pressure mounts as each subject must take a stand for the flexible approach. The point of no return is the moment our subjects commit fully to their new, resilient framework, burning the bridges to their old, less adaptive ways of thinking. This commitment is a leap of faith, a moment of profound vulnerability where the risk of catastrophic failure is highest. For Dr. Vance, the point of no return is a decision to restructure her entire clinical trial based on the rapid handover hypothesis. She submits a paper outlining the low-frequency oscillation signature as the biomarker for early resilience intervention. By publishing her preliminary data, she exposes her theory to immediate, intense scrutiny. She is betting her career on the measurable reality of the invisible muscle. If her subjects do not show the predicted acceleration in stress recovery, her entire lab and years of work will be discredited. She commits to the radical approach, training subjects explicitly in cognitive reappraisal techniques, ignoring the traditional focus on simple relaxation or stress avoidance. Jay Reid reaches his point of no return when he publicly announces a new goal: to compete not in gymnastics, but in an adaptive fitness challenge that requires a completely different skill set. This means shedding the identity of the perfect gymnast and accepting the moniker of the adaptive athlete. He symbolically gives away his old Olympic training gear. The commitment is complete. He is no longer defined by what he lost, but by what he is building. He begins a grueling training regimen focused on asymmetrical strength and movement, a physical and psychological break from his symmetrical past. He must confront the deep-seated fear of public failure in a totally new arena. Chloe Tan's point of no return is signing off on the open-source initiative and making the results of their security audit public. This is a calculated risk that, if the audit reveals deeper, structural flaws, could lead to the complete collapse of her company. She holds an all-hands meeting, not to present a solution, but to present the problem and ask her remaining team to co-create the solution. She commits to a leaderless, distributed model of problem-solving, a resilient system where failure is seen as a collective, not individual, responsibility. This choice alienates the remaining traditionalists on her board but galvanizes her core team. In all three cases, the point of no return involves an act of brave, public vulnerability. It is the recognition that the old self, the old structure, or the old method is insufficient for the future. They step into the unknown, defined not by certainty, but by an unwavering commitment to adapt. At the midpoint of their journey, a significant revelation or twist challenges their assumptions, confirming the power of their resilience but complicating their path forward. The halfway revelation for Dr. Vance is a profound one. The resilience circuit is not a single circuit, it is a networked system. Her data shows that the cognitive reappraisal biomarker is strongest not in isolation, but in subjects who also report high levels of self-compassion. The twist, the invisible muscle, is not just about mental toughness, it's about mental kindness. This means her intervention must be softer, more internally forgiving than originally planned. The realization forces her to integrate positive psychology into her hard science framework, a major professional shift. The pure willpower model is incomplete, success requires grace. The twist for Jay Reid is the re-emergence of his old rival, a former teammate, who has also faced personal adversity. His rival, now retired, becomes a source of unexpected support and mentorship, not competition. This revelation shatters Jay's belief that success must be a solitary, competitive struggle. The twist is that his strongest resource for moving forward comes from the very world he thought he had to leave behind. His new training partner isn't a rival, but a mirror, reflecting his own resilience journey. They begin training together, introducing a necessary social component that accelerates Jay's emotional healing. The success is now shared, not isolated. Chloe Tan's midpoint twist is the result of the open source audit. The global community finds the core flaw quickly, but the twist is that they also discover a second, much deeper vulnerability that the company's internal team had entirely missed. The revelation is twofold: the open source strategy was correct, but the true depth of their failure was greater than they knew. The stakes rise again. They now have an even bigger problem, but they also have a massive, invested global community helping them solve it. The twist confirms that transparency is a force multiplier for resilience. It allows them to address a systemic problem that would have eventually killed the company had they kept their failure hidden. In all cases, the revelation is that resilience is less about individual control and more about systemic connection, whether it be connection between brain systems, social bonds, or external community engagement. The path is harder, but the foundation is now infinitely stronger. New evidence emerges that directly links the subject's external actions to measurable internal changes, demonstrating the psychological impact of their resilient choices. Dr. Vance's clinical trial begins to yield significant results. The new evidence is a clear, statistically verifiable link. Subjects trained in self-compassion and cognitive reappraisal exhibit significantly faster recovery from induced stress, measured by heart rate variability and cortisol decline, than the control group. The psychological impact is profound. The feeling of control, even over an uncontrollable situation, physically alters the body's chemistry. She has evidence that the invisible muscle has a physiological address. The data proves that the conscious, deliberate act of reframing a threat as a challenge directly regulates the autonomic nervous system. This validates her entire thesis, showing that emotional regulation is a skill, not a trait. For Jay Reid, the new evidence is not medical, but functional. During a critical adaptive training session, he attempts a complex maneuver that, weeks ago, would have caused him to shut down in frustration. He fails, but instead of spiraling into anger, he immediately laughs, analyzes the mistake, and tries a slightly modified approach. The psychological impact is observed by his coach and partner. His internal dialogue has fundamentally changed from punitive self-criticism to constructive self-coaching. The evidence is in the speed of his bounce forward. The time between failure and re-engagement drops dramatically. He is no longer afraid of looking foolish. He is only interested in the data of the failed attempt. Chloe Tan's new evidence is a spike in employee applications from top-tier security talent who want to join her radically transparent company. The psychological impact is a reversal of her team's demoralization. The public failure, initially a source of shame, becomes a powerful recruiting and trust-building tool. The new team members are self-selecting for a culture that values learning over perfection. This is organizational resilience in practice. The failure has purged the incompatible elements, the board, the old clients, and attracted the right, mission-aligned people. The evidence shows that the willingness to be vulnerable creates a magnetic field for capable, resilient partners. Across all stories, the psychological impact is the same: the shift from a fixed mindset, "I am bad at this," to a growth mindset, "I failed this time," what can I learn? The resilient choice creates a feedback loop of positive, measurable internal change. As our subject's resilience begins to yield success, external forces, comfortable with the old, rigid models, attempt to suppress or discredit their new truths. The world prefers simple narratives of effortless success, not the messy, iterative reality of resilient struggle. For Dr. Vance, the attempt to suppress the truth comes from the scientific establishment. Her paper is met with a scathing critique from a senior rival who argues that her self-compassion variable is unscientific and cannot be properly quantified, a thinly veiled attack on her methodology. The critique aims to suppress the uncomfortable truth that emotional intelligence is as critical as intellectual rigor in high-level performance. There are attempts to block her from presenting at a major conference and to reduce her grant money, as her findings threaten the status quo of purely biological determinism. She must fight for the validity of the human element in science. Jay Reid faces suppression from the old guard of his sport. His attempts to use his platform to advocate for healthier, more adaptive training methods for young athletes are met with resistance. Coaches argue that his soft approach to failure will erode the necessary killer instinct required for elite competition. The attempts to suppress his truth are framed as protecting the sport's traditions and demanding absolute mental toughness. He is told his story is an anomaly, not a blueprint. He must navigate the political landscape of a sport that resists admitting the psychological damage its old training methods inflict. Chloe Tan's suppression comes from her competitors and conservative investors. Competitors launched negative marketing campaigns, framing her company as the one that failed, suggesting her radical transparency is a gimmick. The pressure is immense. There are quiet attempts to fund a hostile takeover to shut down her open-source project and restore proprietary business secrecy. The suppression is a defense of the old business model where failure is hidden, and success is manufactured through perception management. The world resists the truth that failure, openly shared, can be a competitive advantage. She must use her new community-built security framework to demonstrate superior performance and silence the critics with irrefutable, working technology. The struggle confirms that resilience is not just an internal battle, it is often a fight against a system that profits from rigidity and secrecy. The truth is subversive, and it must be defended fiercely. The narrative reaches its climax as the subjects confront the forces of suppression and put their new resilience to the ultimate test. The pursuit is one of proving the validity and power of the invisible muscle under maximum pressure. Dr. Vance's confrontation is at the annual Neuroscience Summit. She is given a limited slot to present her findings, directly following her most vocal critic. She doesn't rely on complex jargon. Instead, she uses compelling, real-time data visualizations of her subject's brain activity, showing the low-frequency oscillation activating immediately after a stimulus, followed by the rapid, efficient de-escalation of the fear response. Her confrontation is elegant. She presents evidence, not rhetoric, showing that resilience is an observable phenomenon. The pursuit is for scientific acceptance, and she wins over the room by demonstrating that self-compassion is a biological mechanism for survival. Jay Reid's confrontation is on the floor of the Adaptive Fitness Challenge. He is competing against athletes whose bodies are whole, and he is performing a complex routine that integrates his old gymnastic prowess with his new, adaptive strength. The moment of confrontation comes when he falters on a demanding transition. his old self would have collapsed. His resilient self, trained in failure, simply adjusts his grip, modifies the next movement on the fly, and continues the routine, losing only minimal time. His pursuit is for self-validation, proving that he can perform, adapt, and succeed on new terms. The audience sees not a failure, but an act of instantaneous, real-time adaptation, a testament to his mental and physical flexibility. Chloe Tan's confrontation is a live, televised stress test of her new, community-vetted security platform. A major external security firm launches a simulated, high-stakes attack, intending to expose a flaw live on air. The pursuit is to demonstrate the operational superiority of a system built on collective learning. The confrontation lasts for hours, and the system holds. The twist: the attack is repelled, and the system immediately analyzes the failed intrusion, using the data to harden itself further during the attack. The resilient organization proves its worth. It doesn't just survive the attack, it learns from it instantly. In each case, the confrontation is a public display of the invisible muscle in action, proving that the struggle, the vulnerability, and the adaptation were worth the immense cost. Following the successful confrontation, the final pieces of the puzzle fall into place, revealing a unified theory of resilience that integrates the scientific, personal, and organizational lessons. Dr. Vance synthesizes her findings into a single model, the adaptive feedback loop. The final pieces are the 4 steps: 1. Event shock, initial stressor; 2. Cognitive reappraisal, the conscious choice to reframe the event; 3. Emotional regulation, the self-compassion step that lowers cortisol and engages the prefrontal cortex; and 4. Adaptive action, the modified, informed effort. She concludes that resilience is a learned, 4-step process that can be taught in schools and corporations. Her research becomes the scientific backbone for all future resilience training. The final piece of her puzzle is the recognition that the brain is inherently wired for growth, if only given the correct instruction manual. For Jay Reid, the final pieces are his performance and his partner's reaction. He doesn't win the competition, but he achieves his personal best in the adaptive category, and his time is celebrated as a major triumph. The final piece is the realization that success is not a binary outcome, win/lose, it is a measure of mastery over self. He has found his new purpose, teaching adaptive athletes to use their minds to overcome their physical limits, focusing not on what they lack, but on their unparalleled capacity to adapt. He has translated the discipline of gymnastics into the wisdom of coaching. Chloe Tan secures a massive new funding round, not from the old guard venture capitalists, but from an impact fund that invests in open-source, resilient technologies. The final piece of her puzzle is the creation of a new business metric, the Adaptability Index. This index measures a company's success not by the absence of failure, but by the speed and transparency of its recovery. She has successfully redefined failure as a strategic asset. Her company becomes a case study in decentralized, resilient leadership. The unified theory is clear: resilience is the practical application of a growth mindset. It is the choice, repeated moment by moment, to engage the challenge, offer oneself grace, and integrate the lesson into the next attempt. The invisible muscle is fully defined as the active pursuit of mastery through continuous, informed adaptation. Years after their initial crisis, we examine the aftermath, the legacy of their journey, and how their principles tie into the modern world. The aftermath of Dr. Vance's research is the widespread adoption of her adaptive feedback loop model in Fortune 500 leadership training and educational settings. Her work has shifted the psychological paradigm, moving resilience from a niche topic to a core competency. Her legacy is a body of work that provides a roadmap for psychological self-correction, enabling millions to view their personal struggles through a lens of growth, not trauma. She is now advising governments on integrating resilience training into public health initiatives. Her tie to the modern world is evident in the rise of the conscious leadership movement, which values emotional agility as much as technical skill. The aftermath of Jay Reid's journey is the creation of a nonprofit foundation that pairs injured athletes with cognitive coaches. His legacy is a community where failure is celebrated as a source of data, and physical setbacks are framed as opportunities for mental and personal discovery. He is a global advocate for the power of the adaptive mindset. His modern tie is to the concept of post-traumatic growth. He is living proof that a catastrophic event can lead to a state of being stronger and more fulfilled than before the trauma occurred. He proves that the highest form of resilience is turning a personal crisis into a resource for others. The aftermath of Chloe Tan's corporate restructuring is a highly profitable, decentralized organization known globally for its ethical and adaptive security solutions. Her legacy is a new model of corporate governance that views continuous partial failure as a necessary input for continuous, total innovation. She has written a best-selling book on transparent leadership. Her tie to the modern world is its application to complex, volatile systems, from climate change planning to geopolitical conflict resolution, demonstrating that her organizational principles can be scaled to global challenges. Their collective legacy is the irrefutable evidence that true success is not built on pristine, unbroken records, but on the capacity to metabolize and learn from failure. The invisible muscle is now visible through its profound and undeniable impact on the world. We conclude our exploration with a summary of the invisible muscle's power and a final, lingering mystery that continues to drive future research. The summary: resilience is the conscious, learned capacity to engage the challenge, offer self-compassion, and adapt action in response to a setback. It is an adaptive feedback loop, shock-reappraisal-regulation-action. It is not about avoiding the fall, but about mastering the landing and the subsequent ascent. It is the integration of mind, body, and community into a dynamic system of enduring success. The scientific truth is that the brain is wired for growth, and our subjects proved it can be activated under the greatest duress. The personal truth is that identity is a choice, not a circumstance, and that the loss of an old self can be the greatest liberation. The organizational truth is that transparency and vulnerability are the highest forms of competitive strength. The lingering mystery: despite the success of the adaptive feedback loop, Dr. Vance's research has identified a small, fascinating outlier group, individuals who demonstrate profound resilience without the high levels of self-compassion seen in the main cohort. They are high-functioning, adaptive, but emotionally detached. The mystery is the existence of the cold resilient, those who thrive through purely cognitive, almost mechanical detachment from emotional cost. Are they an evolutionary variant, or a different path to the same outcome? This lingering question, the role of emotional cost in long-term resilience, is the subject for the next chapter of this exploration. The investigation into the invisible muscle continues, driven by the knowledge that while we have mapped the common path to success, the full extent of human adaptation remains the final, fascinating frontier. We leave our subjects, not at an endpoint, but at the start of their next, inevitably challenging, and ultimately resilient chapter. The muscle is trained, the work never ceases. The pursuit of success is merely the continuous pursuit of resilience.